Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Eric had written in during the break and wanted to know, he's got a son who's a teenager who's both on the spectrum and has Down syndrome, and they want to get him off of the iPad. They got together with family and he was in his iPad the entire time. And so mom and dad would both like some tips on how to get him interested in and involved in something else besides his iPad.
Yeah. So this is, sometimes I wish I just knew the kids a little bit better because I have so many ideas, but it would be helpful to know them better. So you don't necessarily want him completely off the iPad, but to begin with, you want him off when there's a social gathering, or you want him off and you want him instead to interact with someone. So you can't take an activity that's a preferred activity and replace it with void. It has to be replaced with something that is of equal reinforcement value, or that is tolerable because it's going to be followed by reinforcement. It's hard. It's kind of difficult to explain that, but it's kind of like if I am, let's say my favorite activity, let's say I'm getting a massage, right? And someone comes and says, or actually, here's an example. My son, right? They're in their 20s, and what they do at night, late at night, is get online and game with their friends all over the country, right? All of his buddies are all over the country, and they all kind of get together and do gaming for like an hour or so. Now, if I was to tell him you can't do this anymore, then what am I replacing it with? That's really important. So instead of saying, hey, you just can't do this anymore because I expect you to now come and socialize with us, and especially if it's a child who already has difficulty with socialization, right, which our kids on the spectrum do, obviously. So it would be a very hard thing to do. So instead of that, I would define it a little bit more. And I would say, for instance, at dinner time, nobody can game, nobody can get on their phones. At dinner time, we're going to talk with each other. And that's a short period of time, maybe 20 minutes, where we are all engaging with each other. And that's a doable task. It's something that is possible to be done. And then after dinner, everybody can go on their ways and check their phones, do whatever it is that they want to do, and so on. But so I set specific time frames, and I make sure that during the time frame is short, so it's tolerable, and that it is followed by something enjoyable, that they choose, and that during that time they're occupied. So there's maybe a question and answer going on, or like, let's say if you want to practice this with your family or social in a family setting, each person should have one question of your son and he should respond, or each person can somehow interact, and then that's it. Whether it's 3 minutes or 10 minutes, doesn't matter. You start with what is tolerable, and then you make it gradually increase it, as long as there's some aspect of that is enjoyable for him. Perhaps you as a family engage in a game, perhaps, like an online game or some sort of activity that he finds enjoyable. Because let's face it, a lot of our kids have a difficult time with social activity, and it's very difficult for them to interact with a group of people.
Yeah,
That makes
it
sense.
is. It totally makes sense. It's a hard thing. What I hear in some of the food things and with the behavior things is that it's so scary, because I think what happens, and what I remember when Jem was little, is that all you want is like a level moment and a moment of normalcy. And
Yeah.
so I think what happens a lot of times as parents is that we will kind of give into the moment to just create some sort of a normal, and breaking out of that when things are like a little bit on an even keel, like at least he's got the iPad, so at least he's got that, and we're not having challenging behavior, and we're not having tantrums, or at least he'll eat the green bean
Yep.
So it's like, it's not hit the panic button time, or at least he eats these 10 foods. And then it's so hard for us to have, it's really bravery. The
Oh
bravery
yeah.
to say, I'm going to try something new today. And
Oh,
it might kick up, some behavior, and my child might be unhappy. But we have to break out of the status quo, because we just admitted that the status quo isn't really working. It's a band-aid.
well,
So I'm giving
absolutely.
everybody a hug, I guess is what I'm
I'm
saying.
totally with you, Shannon, and you bring up a very, very important point because we're as parents, you're often just on, sometimes when I used to also run card, and I had my kids and they were grown up and all this sort of stuff, and I had started ACT and I was just like crazy busy all the time. I would always say that, the slightest thing could throw me off edge because my cup was already so full that I couldn't add one more thing to it, right? And that's often how parents feel. They feel like, oh dear God, like it's just it's where I'm on the verge, I'm on the edge of survival, right? So now going to a parent and saying, by the way, take this food away, and that means that your child's probably going to be screaming for the next 2 hours or tantruming or whatever it is just unheard of. It's like, no, parents don't have the energy. We just are burnt out, and we're like, what, are you kidding me? I'd rather receive the short-term reward than the long deal with the long-term reward, right? But it's the same concepts like we're talking about in ABA, which is we as parents do these things because we're trying to avoid our kids being unhappy or our kids having tantrums or all this stuff, right? But which is why I always say get help first. Like build your team if you can, and look at these things from as projects, not long-term life things. Like just like when your kids are little and you want to do a potty training, I never tell you to do that alone. It's hard to do potty training. It's 2, 3, maybe 4 days of intensive around the clock watching the child, right? I always tell people get 2 other friends or 2 other people, even hire them, like whatever it takes, bring them in and sit down and say, we're going to do this together over the next 4 days. When it's a food thing, get a couple of people who are going to be your team, just like like these are your supporters. These are the people who are going to come in when you need a break. Just think of all of that stuff. Take time to build that. It's hard. It's incredibly hard. That's why providers of behavior analysis, ABA providers, are so useful and helpful, because they become that team and they become the people that can help you teach these skills, right? It's super hard to do any of this on your own.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of that, I just want to say though, Evelyn has written in, and Evelyn joined us back when she was studying to be an RBT. She joined for the jargon of the day, but stuck around, is now a BCBA, which just
Wonderful.
makes me so happy. And she said, I wanted to recognize the incredible work you do on providing a compassionate way to understand neurodiversity, and thank you.
That's
And
wonderful.
Evelyn, I'm right with you. That's why we named Dr. Granpeesheh the Advocate of the Year, for that and other things. So absolutely wonderful. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.